Chapter 3. Later that night, Aria's friend Avery turned up on her porch. As soon as the door opened, she brushed past Aria and sat at the kitchen table, flicking her long sable hair over her shoulder and leaning her elbows on the tabletop. "So, you met Elijah Lockwood?" she asked, watching the cursor blink on the empty document that Aria had been trying to fill with text for her follow-up article about the development. She had yet to figure out the best angle to keep her audience engaged. "The man has an ego the size of a small country," Aria replied. "Seemed to think I was out to get him." "That article you wrote wasn't exactly in his favour," Avery reminded her. "Writing an article in support wouldn't have had the same reaction from the public," Aria reasoned. "Besides, I'm working on a series, so he still has a chance to have his say." "So you were trying to stir the pot. Can't blame him for being upset." Aria groaned. "You're supposed to be on my side." Avery grinned widely, exposing the gum she was chewing. "You know he's one of the country's most eligible bachelors." Spitting on her chair, Aria muttered, "What's the world coming to?" "Is he as cute as they say?" She crossed her legs and folded her arms. "I didn't notice." Avery tapped her foot and lifted one winged eyebrow. She clearly didn't believe Aria's disinterest. "All right, so he's incredibly hot," Aria admitted. "I'm not sure I'd say cute. Not when he had those full lips, that strong jaw, and those draw-worthy eyes. More like yummy, swoon-worthy, and one cool customer." "You should have been friendlier," Avery remarked. "You'll probably see a lot of him over the next couple of weeks. It couldn't have hurt to get off on the right foot." "It wasn't my fault," Aria insisted. "Only, maybe I shouldn't have been there in the first place." "But you went there, Ree, and that's okay." Her friend was attempting to placate her, but she didn't care. She glanced at her watch. "Time to head to Davy's." Davy's bar and restaurant made the best cocktails in town, and it had become a tradition for Aria and her friends to head there on a Friday night. Housed in a building dating back to the start of the 20th century, with a concrete facade, high ceilings, off-white walls, and maroon furnishings, the bar was quaint, old-fashioned, but tidy. "Hey, Soph." Aria slid onto the bar stool next to their friend Sophie Delaware and smiled at Davy behind the bar. "I'll have an Irish whiskey with chocolate milk on the rocks, please." Davy poured her drink and passed Avery a beer, which she uncapped and swigged heavily. Cold and wet, just the way I like it," she joked. "Cheers." "How was your day, Soph?" Aria asked. Sophie crinkled her nose. At 5'3" and 25 years old, Sophie was the shortest and the youngest of her friends. With her freckles, slight frame, and youthful face, she was often mistaken for a high school student. "Not so great. I had no sales, and a client screamed at me." "That's rough. Sorry," Aria said. "Ree met a cute guy," Avery said casually. Sophie's eyes lit with interest, her work woes forgotten. "I want to know everything." "There's nothing to tell," Aria said. Briefly, she explained the events of the afternoon and her meeting with Elijah Lockwood. "So really," she finished, "he doesn't have a sense of humour and he thinks I'm a ninny." "I'm sure that's not true." Sophie was too sweet. Aria knew she'd made a fool of herself. She wished she didn't care. All she needed from Eli Lockwood was a good story, but no woman wanted to look like an idiot in front of a handsome man. "You're Mr. Lockwood," Avery began. "He's not my Mr. Lockwood." "Mr. Lockwood," Avery repeated with an eye roll. "What does he look like?" Waving a hand in the air, Aria shrugged as if to ask, "Who cares?" "Brown hair, blue eyes, quite tall?" "Like that guy over there?" Avery asked, tilting her head toward the end of the bar. Sure enough, Elijah Lockwood was nursing a beer only a few seats away from them. His eyes met hers. Aria jolted in her seat. Stunned, she tore her eyes away. The breath trapped in her chest rattled out unevenly as she fought the instant wave of attraction. Not now. Not with this man. She didn't need to complicate matters by being attracted to him. Sophie's jaw went slack. "Oh, quit drooling," Aria snapped. "He's only a man." "You said he was cute, not gobsmackingly hot," Sophie said, loud enough to be heard across the room. Aria begged the floor to swallow her up. Did trouble never cease to follow him? Here she was, sitting at the bar, the last person Eli had expected to see. Usually he didn't have much downtime, but with all non-essential meetings cancelled, he was at a loose end. Anyway, he needed to eat sometime. He'd barely taken a seat and asked for a beer when a splash of colour caught his eye. On closer inspection, he'd recognised the journalist, Aria Simons, the one who was intent on ruining his plans. He couldn't have asked for a better opportunity to observe her. In his business, it paid to know your enemy. Miss Simons appeared older than he'd originally thought, perhaps mid-20s, although she dressed like a 5-year-old girl loose in a mall. The fluffy pink jersey and purple leggings she'd worn earlier had been joined by a blue hat and a pair of knee-high green boots. The result was eye-catching, one of those sights you couldn't look away from no matter how much you tried. She was with friends, a tall, willowy woman with deep-set eyes wearing jeans and a scruffy alumni hoodie, and a short, slight woman wearing a pencil skirt and a white blouse with sky-high stiletto heels. One of these women should help Miss Simon with her wardrobe choices. He didn't believe Miss Simons posed any real threat to his project, but she was likely to make a nuisance of herself. Reporters always did. For as long as he could remember, the media had been interested in his family. Eli had been raised by wealthy parents who thrived in the media spotlight and used it to publicize their advertising company. The media had its uses, but growing up with cameras around every corner had made him jaded. Despite that, it had never bothered him until the mess with Victoria. Now he preferred to avoid the media wherever possible. Happily, Lockwood Holdings Limited sold itself. Because they did good work and made good money, he rarely had to interact with journalists, publicists, or media moguls. This was different. Even though he didn't want this journalist anywhere near him, the cat was out of the bag and he needed to get her on side. His plans would go more smoothly if she didn't fight him the whole way. He needed to play nice and make up for his earlier abruptness. Mark, his lawyer and best friend, was constantly telling him he would get things done more quickly if he turned up the charm. As far as Eli was concerned, his job was to make money, not friends, but it couldn't hurt to sweeten Miss Simons up a bit. He gestured to the bartender. "What's that girl having?" he asked, motioning discreetly toward the journalist, "the one who looks like she took a bath in a rainbow." The bartender grinned. "That's Aria," he said, speaking with the trace of an Irish accent. "You've got your eye on a good 'un, a real sweetheart. She's having Irish whiskey tonight." Irish whiskey from an Irish bartender, go figure. "Send her another one, on me." "Want me to mention you?" Eli shook his head and settled back again to watch the three women. After a few seconds, the taller one turned to face him. He met her gaze until she looked away. Moments later, Aria looked up at him. Her brow furrowed, and she began to say something to her friends, but was interrupted by the bartender. "Hey, Ree, drink for you from the out-of-towner," Davy interrupted Aria's thoughts, offering her a glass. "He sent it?" she asked, following Davy's gaze to Elijah Lockwood. "Tell him thanks, but no thanks." "Are you crazy?" Sophie interjected, stopping Davy before he could leave. "Hot guy sends you a drink, and you send it back." "It's bribery," Aria said. "He wants me to write nice things about him." "So what? When was the last time someone bought you a drink?" Sophie asked. "For that matter, when was the last time you slept with someone?" "Excuse me?" Sophie rolled her eyes. "Come on, Ree, when?" "How is that relevant?" "Why are you avoiding the question?" Aria thought hard. She counted back 18 months. It couldn't have been that long ago. "I don't remember," she hedged. Sophia's expression was disbelieving. "When was the last time you even dated?" "Well, there was Henny." "That was 3 months ago, and you only went to the movies once." Aria sighed. She could see where this was going. "You never give anyone a chance, Aria. You don't have enough fun. Why not accept a drink from Tall, Dark and Rich?" "It would compromise my objectivity." Avery chuckled. "You and your bloody morals. Don't send the drink back. I'll have it." "She who only drinks beer wants the whiskey." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "You won't appreciate it. Besides, if the hottie wants female company, it's going to be me." She ignored their disapproving expressions. "Having sex with him isn't going to compromise my morals. I won't marry the guy. He looks like he could show a girl a good time, that's all." Sophie took the drink from Davy and sipped, her eyes meeting Elijah's over the brim. She waggled her eyebrows. "Please, Soph," Avery groaned. "Have some self-respect." Aria watched Elijah watch Sophie. She thought maybe his lips twitched up at the corners in the faintest hint of amusement. Only for a moment. Then cold detachment returned. "He's so arrogant," she muttered. "And so gorgeous." "So hot," Sophie sighed, echoing Aria's thoughts. "Aren't you and Evan seeing each other at the moment?" Aria asked, poking Sophie's shoulder. "We're having time out." "Thank God," Avery exclaimed. "Don't go back there, Soph. That guy is scum." Evan Wright was her on-again, off-again boyfriend. He was a solicitor and, in Aria's opinion, not good enough to lick the shoes on Sophie's feet. But there was no telling Sophie that. Wanting to hold on to their friendship, Aria tolerated Evan in the hope that her friend would come to her senses. Unfortunately, Avery wasn't as understanding and disparaged Evan at every opportunity. The man was handsome, in a smooth, lawyerly way, and as wealthy as they came in Itirangi. He also had a string of pretty secretaries who made cow eyes at him, and Sophie, poor sweet Sophie, believed he'd never laid a hand on any of them. Their friend was, quite simply, deluded. "Oh, leave it be, Avery," Aria said, receiving a dark look in return. "Let's play pool." The others agreed, eager to smooth over the awkward moment. Aria collected the balls and cue sticks from Davy, shrugging when he winked at her. He knew she was awful at pool. Despite her best efforts, she often knocked the ball off the table or missed the shot completely. It was common knowledge that Aria had no hand-eye coordination, and while most people would have been embarrassed, she was so used to her clumsiness that it didn't really bother her anymore. Elijah drank his second beer and kept an eye on Aria Simons and her friends. After the small one had accepted his drink, they'd completely dismissed him. He wasn't sure whether to be irritated or amused. Being ignored was a new experience for him, although ignoring would imply a certain degree of awareness. It seemed more likely they'd forgotten his existence altogether. Eli checked the time. It was later than he'd thought. He really ought to head to the villa and unpack, but something kept him glued where he was. The girls had migrated from the bar to the pool table and begun to play, recruiting one of the men who'd been watching rugby on the flat screen so they would have evenly numbered teams. After the first few turns, the tall girl and her partner had put away 3 balls, the small girl had put away 1, and Aria had knocked the white ball off the table twice. Did she know how bad she was? She must. Good Lord, it was painful watching her. Eli was brilliant at pool. His parents had always told him that if he was going to bother doing something, he should be the best at it. The journalist lined up another shot. Purple legs stretched out as she reached across the table. Didn't she know it would work better if she walked around the table so she didn't have to reach so far? She swung back, then missed the ball. Eli couldn't take it anymore. He crossed the room and stood behind her. She shifted on her feet, trying to get into a better position. "You're doing it wrong," he said. She jumped, whacking her knee on the edge of the table and landing on his foot. He grunted as his big toe exploded in pain. "What the hell are you doing?" Her eyes were big, brown, and accusing. "Helping," he replied. "It'll work better this way." Gently, he turned her around and adjusted her waist so she was tucked up against him. He extended her arms and shifted the cue stick so it rested between her thumb and forefinger. "Just be gentle," he said, swaying the cue stick back, then forwards, knocking the ball into the far right pocket. Like that. Eli took a few moments to enjoy the wide-eyed expression on her face before he released her and strode out of the bar. As he pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders, he couldn't help recalling the curve of her body and the way she'd been pressed against him so deliciously. "Forget it. You have been single for far too long."